Today, I am going to talk about carcinoma service, its burden in the society, risk factors, etiopathogenesis, different clinical features, how to diagnose, and different modalities of treatment. Worldwide, the incidence, prevalence, and mortality due to various cancers worldwide are collected by the Global Cancer Observatory, and the data is published every year, commonly known as Globocan data. According to the 2018 data, carcinoma service is the fourth most common cancer worldwide. It is the second commonest female cancer occurring in low middle income countries. In absolute numbers, there are 5,69,847 new cases occurred in 2018 and 3,11,365 deaths occurred in 2018. The important thing about this data, 85% of this occur in developing countries. In India, it is the second most common cancer, roughly about 16%. In absolute number, about 96,922 new cases occurred and 60,078 deaths occurred due to carcinoma service per year. Carcinoma service is one of the few cancers where the etiology is well known. We all know it is caused by human papillomavirus of high risk group. And there is a long period of pre-malignant phase, about 5 to 10 years, and this pre-malignant stage can be detected by different screening methods, and effective treatment is also available. Even if she develops carcinoma cervix, and if detected early, cure rate is more than 90%. That means there is primary prevention, secondary and tertiary effective preventive methods are available for carcinoma cervix. And applying this universal screening to the population, developed countries are able to reduce the incidence, morbidity and mortality due to carcinoma cervix. I have just told you about the brighter side of carcinoma cervix. But what is the reality? We have seen from the statistics, it commonly occur, or majority of the cancer occur in the low middle income countries where there are no universal screening or treatment services are inadequate. Moreover, carcinoma cervix is one cancer which can be asymptomatic even in advanced stage. Again, the person affected are usually single women, that is either widow, divorced or unmarried women, who have no access to this health facility. So, carcinoma cervix on the dim side, it is a disease of or an example of social and sexual discrimination. The initiating event in carcinogenesis of carcinoma cervix is infection with the high-risk human papillomavirus. There are more than 100 different types of human papillomavirus. Out of these, 15 subtypes are known as high risk. Of this high risk HPV virus, 16-18 subtype is responsible for 70% of the carcinoma cervix. The next commonest being 45, 32, 33, 52, 58, etc. HPV infection is occurred through sexual intercourse. An HPV infection is common in the early reproductive age, and 80 to 90% of the women, sexually active women, may acquire the infection, but in majority it will be cleared within 1 or 2 years. In a small percentage, it may persist and may result in premalignant and malignant change of the cervix. HPV virus has a predilection for transformation zone where there is active proliferation of cells. And once the virus is getting infected, they get incorporated into the cell DNA, and they will produce two proteins, E6 and E7, called early viral proteins. This will infect or suppress the tumor suppressor genes P53 and RB or retinoblastoma gene. P53 gene will be responsible for cell arrest and apoptosis, which is a usual procedure when there is a damaged DNA. If it is suppressed, this apoptosis will not be taking place and the cell arrest will not occur. Retinoblastoma gene will be responsible for suppression of undue proliferation of cells. When it is suppressed, the proliferation of cells will be uncontrolled and result in carcinogenesis. So, the production of early protein and suppression of P53 and retinoblastoma gene is an essential thing in the carcinogenesis of cervix. Carcinoma cervix when arise from ectocervix in 80% of the cases and from the endocervix in 20% of the cases. If arising from the ectocervix, to the naked eye, the growth may appear as a cauliflower-like growth or ulcerative type, where the cervix may look like an eaten up cervix. Sometimes there may not be any external evidence, but due to the malignant cells growing beneath the epithelium, it gives a hard and indurated appearance, which we call as an infiltrative type. So, macroscopically, it can, or morphologically, ectocervical carcinoma can be cauliflower-like growth, can be an ulcerative type or infiltrative type. Endocervical carcinoma, on the other hand, it expands the cervix since it is growing inside the cervical canal and gives the cervix a barrel-shaped appearance. Or the cervix may simply look larger or and inappropriate for the age of the woman. Major histological type that occur is the squamous cell carcinoma, about 80 to 85%, and 15 to 20% may be adenocarcinoma. Histologically, apart from the major type, squamous cell carcinoma and adenocarcinoma, a variety of malignancy has been described, which are rare. They are adenosquamous carcinoma, sarcoma, malignant melanoma, neuroendocrine carcinoma, and metastatic carcinoma. Coming to the histology in detail, I have already said squamous cell carcinoma is the commonest. There are different types of squamous cell carcinoma. The most common is the large cell keratinizing or non-keratinizing, depending upon the differentiation. In keratinizing type, you can see keratin pearls deposit during histopathological examination. In non-keratinizing type, there may be keratin surrounding the individual cells. And large cell keratinizing as well as non-keratinizing type has a good prognosis. Other types of squamous cell carcinoma is small cell variety, which can be again subdivided into poorly differentiated and anaplastic carcinoma, which has a poor prognosis compared to large cell variety. Verrucous carcinoma is a type of squamous cell carcinoma having a low malignant potential. Other variety rarely occur is the papillary or translational carcinoma. Depending upon the cell type, adenocarcinoma is also have different varieties. Most common is the endocervical type. Other types are endometrial, intestinal, clear cell, mixed cell adenocarcinoma. Adenoma malignum, willow glandular papillary adenocarcinoma has also been described. Adenosquamous carcinoma is a rare variety of malignancy that occur in the cervix. It has a mature, immature, adenoid basal carcinoma, adenoid cystic carcinoma, etc. Are the different varieties of adenosquamous carcinoma described. And adenosquamous carcinoma has a very bad prognosis. By the time it is diagnosed, already it has been metastasized. Sarcoma of different types like embryonal, rhabdomyosarcoma, leiomyosarcoma, mesodermal tumor, cervical adenosarcoma, all varieties of sarcoma can arise from the cervix even though rare. Malignant myeloma can arise from the cervix. Another variety of carcinoma that's seen on the cervix are neuroendocrine carcinoma of different types, which has a very bad prognosis. And finally, metastatic carcinomas from various sites like breast, intestine, thyroid, ovary can also occur on the cervix. Knowing the pattern of spread of carcinoma will aid in the plan of management. There are different routes of spread for carcinoma cervix. They are direct invasion, lymphatic metastasis, blood-borne metastasis, and intraperitoneal implantation. Coming to the direct invasion, carcinoma can spread deep into the stroma of the cervix, can upward to involve the uterine body, can spread downwards to involve the vagina, sideways to involve the parametrium and pelvic side wall. It can also spread to the adjacent structures, to the bladder and rectum. Since there is Pauter Douglas intervening between the rectum and the uterus, the spread to the rectum is relatively late compared to the spread to the bladder. Another important route of spread is through the lymphatics. Lymphatics may be draining along the uterosacral ligament to the presacral nodes and the rectal nodes, along the transversocervical ligament to the pelvic lymph nodes, the obturator, hypogastric nodes, common iliac nodes, external iliac nodes, and para-aortic nodes. Of this, common iliac and para-aortic nodes are the secondary group of lymph nodes. In advanced stages, metastasis can occur even in the inguinal nodes and supraclavicular nodes. Spread can occur through the blood vessels to distant sites like liver, lung, bone, brain, etc. Intraperitoneal implantation occur rarely, and ovary is a common site. Also, after the surgery or during surgery, recurrence or implantation can occur to the vault of the vagina. The chance of involvement of the pelvic and para-aortic nodes depends on the staging as well as the volume of the tumor. The lower stages has a less chance of pelvic node involvement and para-aortic node involvement. As shown in this slide, in stage A1, the pelvic node involvement is only 5%, whereas the para-aortic nodes risk is 0. If the stage increases to A2, there is a 3 to 5% chance of pelvic node involvement, and it goes up to 55% chance of pelvic node involvement in 4th stage, and there is a chance of 40% involvement of para-aortic nodes. And this knowledge is very important in planning the extent of dissection during surgery. There are certain risk factors which will cause increased risk for occurring carcinoma cervix. First and foremost are early sexual activity and a delivery at a younger age, less than 16 years old. Multiple sexual partners also important because it may increase the chance of occurring human papilloma virus. The number of partner is also important. Another important cause is a presence of sexually transmitted disease like herpes simplex virus, which will act as a cofactor. Human immunodeficiency virus will aid in occurring the carcinoma by decreasing the immunity. Combined oral contraceptive also said to be a slight increase in causing carcinoma cervix compared to non-OC takers. This is because the oral contraceptive may cause proliferation of the cervical glands, which may aid in occurring of HPV virus. Other risk factors are multiparity and smoking. Coming to the clinical features of carcinoma cervix, carcinoma cervix is notorious to be asymptomatic, especially in sexually inactive women. That is why most often these carcinomas are diagnosed in late stages. If symptomatic, the cardinal symptoms with which they present are bleeding, discharge per vaginum, pain and cachexia. Of this, bleeding and discharge per vaginum is said to be an earlier symptoms, and pain and cachexia as late symptoms. When we say bleeding and discharge per vaginum are early symptoms, it doesn't mean the carcinoma is in the early stage. It can be an advanced malignancy most often. Coming to the bleeding, most often these women are in the perimenopausal or menopausal age, and if she is in the perimenopausal age group, she may present with the postcoital bleeding, which is the earlier type, or she may present with the intermenstrual bleeding or irregular bleeding. And in postmenopausal women, postmenopausal bleeding is a common presentation. Rarely they may present with massive bleeding for the first time. Another common symptom is discharge per vaginum, which is foul smelling and blood stains. This is due to the growth getting infected and leading to foul smelling discharge. Pain is a late symptom due to local spread involving the nerve endings, and the bone metastasis may result in intractable pain. Of course, Cachexia is a late symptom where the woman may be emaciated day by day without any reason. Other presentations are she may present with anemia and land up in the medicine department. She may present with renal failure. This is due to the carcinoma spreading into the parametrium, which involve the ureter mechanically and cause obstruction of the ureter, causing obstructive uropathy. And uremia is the most common reason for death of this woman. Other type of presentation is when there is an endocervical carcinoma, the cervical canal will be usually blocked by the growth, may resulting pending of blood and secretion inside the uterus, presenting as a pyometra, enlarged uterus, and she may present with a mass abdomen. Late in presentation, when there is an involvement of the bladder, it may result in a fistula formation and leakage of urine. It can also involve the rectum and produce a rectovaginal fistula, causing fecal incontinence. The foul smelling discharge, the development of fistulas will make this woman a social outcast, and they may suffer in solitude. The clinical signs depend on the stage of the disease. In early stages, the cervix may look normal, but on touching, it may be friable, there may be bleeding to touch, it may be indurated, and the cervix may be immobile. Contact bleeding, it may be of different types. It may be bleeding to touch during examination, or postcoital bleeding, or bleeding during staining. All these are said to be contact bleeding, is an early sign of carcinoma cervix. In advanced stages, you can see a cauliflower-like growth, or sometimes it may be a fungating mass. The cervix sometimes may be eaten up cervix, or what is an ulcer on the cervix. It's an intracervical carcinoma. You can see the abnormal shape of the cervix, which may be barrel shaped or a larger cervix to the age of the woman. And if it is involving the parametrium, there can be nodularity of the parametrium, induration of the parametrium. The vaginal wall may be stenos, upper part of the vagina may be stenos, which may be a sign of carcinoma cervix, especially in postmenopausal woman. And there can be features of infiltration of the anterior and posterior wall. When you suspect a carcinoma or malignancy of the cervix, how to diagnose? The first thing you have to remember is pap smear has no role in diagnosing malignancy. If there is an abnormal cervix, don't go for a pap smear because it has a very high false negative result. Up to 50% false negativity is there, and you may miss even an invasive carcinoma if you go for a pap smear. Pap smear is essentially for a screening test, not a diagnostic test. If the cervix is obviously abnormal, you can take a punch biopsy, and when you take a biopsy, you should be very careful to involve or take the biopsy from an edge of the lesion. Otherwise, you may get only necrotic material and you get a false negative report. If the cervix is apparently looking normal, then you may have to go for a colposcopy directed biopsy. In endocervical carcinoma, we have to go for endocervical curating, and rarely we may have to resort to a corn biopsy, especially in cases of microinvasive carcinoma. Ultrasound, CT scan, MRI, PET-CT and FDG PET may help to know the extent of the lesion, not for diagnosis. Colposcopy is an important tool in the diagnosis of carcinoma cervix. It is indicated as a part of evaluation of an abnormal cytology or in a normal appearing cervix where there is a symptoms suggestive of carcinoma cervix. And the colposcopic finding which is suggestive of abnormal or invasive carcinoma are abnormal blood vessels. When we say abnormal blood vessels, in the normal cases, the blood vessels are just like a taproot branching, where the larger vessels give rise to smaller vessels or branches at acute angles, and the caliber of the vessels will be smaller as the branch and rebranch. When there is neovascularization, this pattern will be changing, and you can get the branching can be obtuse. The branches may be larger than the parental vessels. There can be acute bending of the vessel, hairpin, tadpole appearance. All these are abnormal blood vessel pattern is suggestive of invasive carcinoma. Other findings in colposcopy are irregular surface contour with the loss of surface epithelium due to ulceration. And a normal cervix or healthy cervix appear in colposcopy as a pink color. When there is invasive carcinoma, the color tone change to yellow to orange. The various imaging modalities used in carcinoma cervix are ultrasound, CT, MRI and PET-CT and FDG PET. All these imaging modalities in general has a high false positive and false negative. They have fairly sensitive and good specificity. Of these imaging modalities, MRI is good for detecting the soft tissue involvement, especially involvement of the parametrium adjacent structures, whereas CT is more good for detecting the lymph nodes. Or an integrated MRI and CT or PET-CT is more informative. Coming to the individual methods, ultrasound is the cheapest modality of imaging, but it has a high false negative about 30%, very low sensitivity around 20%, but it has a high specificity, almost 99%. CT had a sensitivity of 34% and a specificity of 97%, but has a false negative rate of 10 to 15% and a false positive rate of 20 to 25%. If the CT and MRI are compared, MRI has a more sensitive compared to CT with the equivalent specificity, and it is more excellent in sensitivity for detecting parametrial disease. PET in conjunction with CT or MRI is used to detect metastatic disease, especially FDG PET, fluorodeoxyglucose, is a nucleotide which can detect active metabolic tissue, especially so useful in detecting active metastatic disease, especially when there is a recurrence. And PET is also more useful for detecting extrapelvic disease and lymph node metastasis, and it is also used for predicting the outcome of treatment. PET and CT integrated imaging is more useful for pelvic adenopathy. Lymphangiography is seldom used now, and it is good for detecting para-aortic node metastasis, but has a high false positive rate of 20 to 40%, a false negative rate of 10 to 20%. PET-CT can also be used for diagnosing metastasis and to take a guided fine needle aspiration biopsy to confirm the metastasis histopathologically. Any malignancy has to be staged, which will give an idea about the spread of the disease and is essential for planning the treatment. It will also help in determining the prognosis of the disease. Varying staging systems are in use. In carcinoma service, we use the FIGO staging system. In this staging system, introduced in 2009, is essentially clinical. Guidelines are in use to which investigation to be done for staging. Lymph node affection was not included in staging. Imaging technologies are also not included for staging, and it is used only for treatment purpose and individualized. Hence, there is no uniformity in staging, treatment and prognosis while using this system. So, FIGO has revised the staging system in 2018, and now we use the revised FIGO staging system 2018. In the revised staging system, we can use surgery and examine the specimen for histopathological examination and stage accordingly, which will increase the accuracy. Or we can use imaging techniques like CT, MRI, PET-CT, etc. and to know the extent of the disease and used for staging. Both methods are acceptable, but you have to make a note of the methods used for staging. If it is imaging, you have to use the notation R, or if you are using surgery and histopathological examination, the notation P is used. Also, lymph nodes involvement are also taken into the staging system. Carcinoma service is staged mainly into 4 stages. Only invasive carcinoma is included in the staging. Carcinoma in situ is not included. Also, extension to the body of the uterus is discarded. In stage 1, the lesion is confined to the cervix. It is again divided into 2, 1A and 1B. A is known as microinvasive carcinoma. It is again divided into A1, where the depth of invasion is less than 3 mm. In A2, the depth of invasion is between 3 mm and 5 mm. Stage 1B includes all microinvasion greater than 5 mm and all visible lesion confined to the cervix. It is again subdivided into B1, B2 and B3. B1 is where the depth of inversion is greater than 5 mm, but the size of the tumor is less than 2 cm. B2 when the size of the tumor is more than 2 cm but is less than 4 cm. B3 tumor length is more than or tumor size is more than 4 cm. In stage 2, the growth has spread beyond the cervix to involve the parametrium but not up to the pelvic side wall or extend to the vagina, not involving the lower one-third of the vagina. Stage 2 is again divided into two parts, stage 2A and B. A is involvement of the upper two-thirds of the vagina without involvement of the parametrium, which is again subdivided into A1 and A2 depending on the size of the tumor. A1 is when the tumor size is less than 4 cm. A2 is when the tumor size is more than 4 cm. In stage B, there is involvement of the parametrium but not up to the pelvic side wall. The vagina may or may not be involved. In stage 3, there is spread of the tumor to the pelvic side wall or there is involvement of the lower one-third of the vagina. There can be involvement of the kidney causing hydronephrosis or non-functioning kidney. There can be involvement of the pelvic or para-aortic nodes. Any one of these, if affected, we come to stage 3. Stage 3 is subdivided into A, where there is involvement of the lower one-third of the vagina. B, there is involvement of the pelvic side wall or non-functioning kidney or hydronephrosis. C is where there is involvement of the nodes, which is again subdivided into C1, which is involvement of the pelvic nodes, C2 involvement of the para-aortic nodes. Stage 4 is where the tumor has spread beyond the genital organs, again divided into A and B. A is when there is involvement of the bladder and rectum, which should be proved or substantiated by histopathological examination or biopsy proved. And 4B is distal metastasis, where there is involvement of the lung, liver or inguinal nodes and other distant lymph nodes. Once the diagnosis of malignancy is made certain by histopathological confirmation, we have to evaluate the woman for the extent of the disease, for any comorbidities and also for any associated gynecological problems. This will help to stage the disease and also to plan the appropriate treatment for that woman. General and systemic examination is an important part of clinical evaluation. In general examination, look for pallor, enlargement of axillary, cervical and inguinal nodes should be looked for. Respiratory system should be specifically looked for any evidence of pleural effusion or pulmonary metastasis. Per abdomen, palpate for any enlarged uterus or any other mass or free fluid in the abdomen. A per speculum examination, we have already seen the abnormality, we have already discussed. In addition, we have to look for the size of the lesion or extent of the lesion, whether there is any stenosis of the upper part of the vagina, which suggests involvement of the vaginal furnaces. And there can be evidence of infiltration of the vagina or vulva is present or not. And a bimanual examination should be done to know whether there is a parametrial involvement. Parametrium is nodular or thickened. Palpate the uterosacral ligament and palpate the vagina and the furnaces. This will tell you the extent of the lesion. And per rectal examination should also be done, which will will give you a better idea about the parametrial uterosacral involvement and involvement of the rectum. This is followed by the appropriate imaging techniques like ultrasound, CT, MRI, we have already discussed, which will tell you the other organ affected, the involvement of the lymph node, status of the kidney, etc. And other investigations needed are X-ray test, which will tell you the involvement of the respiratory system. Also, blood examination to know the renal function test, liver function test, as done routinely to look for any comorbidities present in the woman. An ultrasound examination is also mandatory, which will tell you any adnexal mass, fibroid. If it is present, we have to modify our treatment accordingly. After evaluation and staging of the disease, we have to plan the treatment depending upon the individual characteristics. The factors which influence the planning of treatment are stage of the disease, age of the woman, whether she desires further fertility or not, whether there is any comorbidities like heart disease, any chronic lung disease, or any abnormal kidney or liver function test, which will increase her risk for surgery and anesthesia, or is there any gynecological problems like fibroid uterus, ovarian cyst, pyometra, etc., which should be tackled along with her malignancy. The different modalities of treatment available are surgery, radiotherapy, chemoradiation, and chemotherapy. For treatment's sake, we can divide the different stages of disease into two: early stage up to the stage 2A, where surgery or radiotherapy can be opted. Both modality of treatment give equal result and should be decided individually whether the woman go for a surgery or radiotherapy depends on other individual characteristics. Later stages, which mean stage 2B and greater, is treated with chemoradiation. When two modalities of treatment give the same result, we have to choose between depending upon the advantages and disadvantages and which suit the particular patient. Let us see the advantages of surgery or radiotherapy. The most important advantage of surgery or radiotherapy is the ovarian function can be preserved, thereby preserving fertility. Sexual function will not be affected because we can preserve the sufficient length of the vagina. And the woman has a psychological well-being because she feels that whatever cancer is there is removed from her body. At the time of surgery, we can tackle any associated gynecological problems like ovarian pathology, fibroid, etc. And the complication do occur during surgery, but they are amenable to correction compared to complications that occur due to radiotherapy. Women less than 65 years without any comorbidity in early stage and having non-voluminous tumor is the ideal candidate for surgery. Non-voluminous tumor may mean tumor which is not large. We have divided the stages. We have seen that there is in stage 1 there is a subdivision as stage 1B3 where the volume of the tumor is more than 4 cm. Also in stage 2 A. A2 is the tumor volume is greater than 4 centimeter. Such voluminous tumor, there is a more chance of lymph node involvement and may need postoperative radiotherapy. So they are not an ideal candidate for surgery. In advantage of radiotherapies, it can be given or used for treatment for all stages and can be given to women with comorbidities. But there are certain contraindications, like it cannot be used for women having acute or chronic PID, cannot be given for women with a pelvic kidney, inflammatory bowel disease, or women with it cannot be given for women with gynecological problems like myoma, ovarian tumor, genital fistula, or prostodentia. It is also contraindicated in young women because we cannot preserve the fertility. There are certain conditions which reduce the effectiveness of radiotherapy, like a woman having a barrel-shaped cervix, where the radiotherapy cannot be optimally given to all tumor masses because of the large volume. When there is anatomical distortion also, that may become ineffective. Again, it is less effective in histological types like adenocarcinoma and adenosquamous carcinoma. Other problem with radiotherapy is complications do result from radiotherapy, which may be difficult to treat compared to complications resulting from surgery. Surgical treatment offered also depend on stage. It may be a corn biopsy or trachelectomy for a patient who wants to conserve the uterus. For those who doesn't want to conserve the uterus, it can be a extrafacial hysterectomy, modified or radical hysterectomy, and pelvic lymph node dissection is an integral part of surgery. So we will see the treatment stage by stage. In stage 1A1, where the microinversion is less than 3 mm and without lymphovascular space involvement, in a young patient, corn biopsy will be sufficient. In a woman who doesn't want to conserve the uterus, can go for an extrafacial hysterectomy. In women, when there is a lymphovascular space involvement with 1A1 or 1A2, modified trachelectomy should be done along with the pelvic lymph node dissection in a young patient who want to conserve the uterus. For those who doesn't want to conserve the uterus, you can go for a modified radical hysterectomy and pelvic lymph node dissection. 1B1, where the inversion is more than 5 mm, but tumor size is less than 2 cm. In a young patient, we can go for a radical trachelectomy with a pelvic lymph node dissection. In a woman who doesn't want to conserve the uterus, we can go for a radical hysterectomy plus pelvic lymph node dissection. In stage 1B2 and 2A1, this only no conservative management, only radical hysterectomy plus pelvic lymph node dissection. So remember, conservative surgery to preserve fertility is done only up to stage 1B1. unlike simple hysterectomy which we do in benign condition. In malignancy, we do a radical hysterectomy. What do you mean by radical hysterectomy? Now we know some malignancy is spreading locally along the attachment of the uterus, that is along the parametrium and along the vagina to the surrounding structures. So when we do a surgical treatment, we try to achieve a clearance or tumor-free margin. For that, we have to remove this attachment, that is the parametrium and attachment of the vagina to the pelvic side wall, what we call as the paracarpium, and it also remove a part of the vagina. So radical hysterectomy, we remove the parametrium, paracarpium and the part of the vagina which is affected along with the uterus. This is the radical hysterectomy, and depending upon the extent of these structures are removed, there are different types of radical hysterectomy. According to pure Rutledge classification, there are 5 types of radical hysterectomy. Type 1 is also called extrafacial hysterectomy. We all know the pelvic cellular tissue form covering or condense to form fascia which covers the pelvic organ, like the vesicovaginal fascia, rectovaginal fascia. This loose areolar tissue covers the cervical fascia or cervix also. When a hysterectomy is done for a benign condition, we remove this fascia, we exclude this fascia and do the hysterectomy, or we call the intrafacial hysterectomy. But this fascia may contain lymphatics, and in malignancy, this uterus is removed along with this fascia. Then it is called an extrafacial hysterectomy. Type 2 radical hysterectomy is also called modified radical or Wertheim's hysterectomy, in which the parametrium is removed medial to the crossing of the ureter, and the vagina is removed only 1 to 2 centimeters of the vagina, and small part of the paracarpium is removed. In type 3 radical hysterectomy, the parametrium is removed from the pelvic side wall. Paracarpium also is removed to a later extent, and the vagina is removed. 3 to 4 centimeters of the vagina is also removed. Type 3 radical hysterectomy is also called Meeks hysterectomy. Type 4 and 5 radical hysterectomies are extended radical hysterectomy, which involves ascenderation of the pelvis, may be again divided into anterior ascenderation, posterior ascenderation or total ascenderation, where we remove the bladder, rectum or both, and is associated with diversion operation for urine and fecal material. The most commonly done radical hysterectomy are Meeks hysterectomy or the type 3 radical hysterectomy and type 2 radical hysterectomy or Wertheim hysterectomy. You should know the difference between the two. In type 2, the uterine artery is transected at the level of crossing of the ureter, whereas it is transected at its origin in type 3 radical hysterectomy. Cardinal ligament is cut medial to the ureter, and it cuts only the anterior vesicouterine ligament. In type 3 radical hysterectomy, Cardinal ligament is cut close to the pelvic side wall. Both anterior and posterior vesicouterine ligament is cut. Vaginal cuff removed is smaller in type 2 radical hysterectomy. It is larger vaginal cuff is removed in a type 3 vaginal hysterectomy. So it differs only in the extent of removal of the parametrium and vagina. Radical trachelectomy is done first by Daniel Dargent in 1994 to preserve the fertility in young patients who suffer from early stages of carcinoma cervix. He did it vaginally, and the part removed are cervix, upper part of the vagina with the attached ligaments, and the isthmus. The uterus is cut at the level of the isthmus, and it is body of the uterus anastomosed with the lower part of the vagina, and along with the isthmial circlage to prevent abortion in case a woman gets pregnant. This can be radical or modified radical according to the length of parametrium removed, as in a radical hysterectomy and modified radical hysterectomy. Also, trachelectomy can be done abdominally. It is done in young patient with the carcinoma of stage 1A2 to stage 1B1. Pelvic lymphadenectomy is an integral part of radical surgery for carcinoma cervix, and the lymph nodes involved are obturator node, internal iliac node or hypogastric nodes, medial and lateral group of external iliac node, and presacral and rectal nodes. These are the primary group of lymph node involved, and the secondary group of involved are common iliac and para-aortic nodes. So during pelvic lymphadenectomy, we have to remove all these lymph nodes, and it involves extensive dissection. Only if the common iliac nodes are enlarged, we go for dissection of the para-aortic nodes. In early stages, that is stage 1 up to stage 1B1, we can look for the sentinel node. Sentinel node is one which is the first lymph node to be involved with the metastasis. It may be identified by injecting blue dye or radioactive technetium-99 prior to the surgery at 3 and 9 o'clock position of the cervix. And during laparotomy, we can detect the involved lymph node by its blue color, or if the technetium is used, by using a gamma probe. And this sentinel node may be visible in 80 to 100% of the cases, and this can be selected and look for any evidence of metastasis. If it is negative for metastasis, we can avoid a extensive pelvic node dissection. After surgery, the histopathological examination should be done on the surgical specimen, and you have to look for the risk factors, which will tell you the chance of recurrence. You have to look for the tumor size, cervical stromal invasion, lymphovascular space invasion, positive or closed margins, the lymph nodes are positive or not, is there any parametrial involvement with the metastasis. If the tumor size is large, that is more than 4 cm, cervical stromal invasion is present, lymphovascular space involvement is there, it's an intermediate risk, and there is a 30% chance of recurrence. If there is a positive or closed margin and lymph node is positive for metastasis or microscopic metastasis involvement of the parametrium, it belongs to high risk group and there is a 40% chance of recurrence. After the surgery, depending on the histopathological finding, the woman may be categorized into no risk, intermediate risk, and high risk factors. If she had undergone a Cone biopsy and the margins are found to be positive, then she may have to go for a extrafacial hysterectomy, or in a young patient, a modified radical trachelectomy is indicated. Those having a radical trachelectomy or a radical hysterectomy, if there is an intermediate risk factor, have to undergo adjuvant radiation, and those women with the high risk factors have to undergo chemoradiation post-operatively to prevent any recurrence. Coming to the complications of radical hysterectomy, during surgery there can be excessive blood loss, injury to the bladder and ureter, leading to ureterovaginal and sacrovaginal fistula, pulmonary embolism, small bowel obstruction, and febrile morbidity. Related complications are postoperative bladder dysfunction, which may need prolonged catheterization and lymphocyst formation. Bladder hypertonia or atony is a chronic complication that can develop rarely. Radiation therapy can be used as a primary mode of therapy for all stages of carcinoma cervix. Radiation plan consists of a combination of external beam radiotherapy and brachytherapy, and the idea is to deliver 7000 to 8000 centigrade to point A and 6000 to 6000 centigrade radiation to the point B. Point A is 2 cm superior to the external os and 2 cm lateral to the cervical canal. Point B is 3 cm lateral to point A. External beam therapy will take care of the lymph node and help to shrink the central tumor, while brachytherapy will applied through intracavitary applicator and or interstitial implant will provide radiation boost to the central tumor. Intracavitary radiation alone may be sufficient in cases of small tumors where the lymph node metastasis is negligible. If the central tumor is small, intracavitary radiation is given first, followed by external beam radiotherapy to take care of the nodes. Whereas, if the tumor is bulky, external beam radiotherapy is given first, which will take care of the lymph node plus shrink the tumor so that intracavitary application can take care of the central tumor effectively. Commonly, 5 weeks external beam radiotherapy is given upfront, with brachytherapy introduced at week 4. Conventional brachytherapy traditionally uses low dose release isotope cesium-137, which releases 0.4 gray per hour for an extended period of 1 to 3 days. This means the patient needs admission, immobilization for a longer time, and have to give DVT prophylaxis. And there is radiation exposure to healthcare worker because they use a preload technique where the needles and the ovoids are introduced and the position of the two are confirmed by X-ray, and then the radiation needle is introduced. Since radioactive needle is handled and introduced manually, that will involve radiation to the healthcare personnel. Nowadays, high dose releasing iridium 192 needle is used to deliver 12 gray per hour, and it is capable of delivering the required dose within minutes. So this can be given as an outpatient treatment. There is no need for a inpatient or immobilization, and no need for a DVT prophylaxis. For this, robotic control after loading system is used, so there is no exposure to healthcare personnel. Another method of brachytherapy is pulse dose therapy, which is not commonly used. Here we use iridium 192 high dose release source, which release pulsed radiation regimen which mimic the radiological effects of low dose release. This means it requires patient immobilization and admission, hence not favored. Conventional brachytherapy, which uses a single intracavitary needle, may not be able to treat effectively if the central tumor is larger or bulkier. So the newer combined intracavitary and interstitial brachytherapy applicators successfully treat bulky or irregularly shaped tumor targets. A single intracavitary radioactive needle may not be able to give sufficient radiation if it is a tumor mass is very large. So to overcome this deficiency, there is a newer technique called combined intracavitary and interstitial brachytherapy application, which will treat bulky or irregularly shaped tumor target. The different techniques are described, like low dose release technique, high dose release technique, combined intracavitary and interstitial brachytherapy or pulsed dose therapy. All these use 2D technique, that is to measure the tumor size as well as to apply the radiation needle. They use X-ray or CT or MRI, which may not be able to treat properly in a bulky tumor or irregularly enlarged tumor. So to overcome this theme, now the latest technique is 3D technique, where CT and MRI guided 3D images of the tumor is generated using computer, and dose is calculated according to the volume of the tumor. And this is called image guided adaptive brachytherapy. And this is by using this method, there is superior survival, better tumor control, less side effect, and improved safety. And cumulative dose of more than that can be supplied by the other type of brachytherapy can be given by this method without any added side effect. Extended beam therapy is given using cobalt 60 or cesium needles, and usually the conventional method is four block technique, where radiation is given in the anteroposteriorly as well as from the sides. And usually it is given as a 5 weeks therapy, 5 days in a week. So amounting to 25 to 28 sessions of radiotherapy. The problem with this technique is the dose may be given, may not be controlled. All the structures within the radioactive field may receive the same radiation. So it may affect the bone marrow, it will affect the rectum, bladder, intestine, etc. And some of the areas may be over radiated, other areas may be underdosed. So the modern technique is where there is an intensity modulated radiation therapy. Here also they use a 3D technique, calculate the dose, and even can be calculated the adequate dose for the adequate tumor volume, which has an improved cure rate. The concept of chemoradiation encompasses the benefit of systemic chemotherapy with the benefit of regional radiation therapy. Chemotherapy sensitizes cells to radiation therapy and improve local regional control. Here the chemotherapy is given along with or just before radiation therapy. The agents used are cisplatin and 5-fluorouracil. It is indicated in advanced carcinoma cervix as well as in postoperative cases where there is high risk factors. In carcinoma cervix, radiotherapy alone is seldom used. It is always combined with the chemotherapy, and which is given concurrently and called chemoradiation. Coming to stage-wise use of chemotherapy therapy, tumors which belong to the early stages but which are bulky like 1B3 and 2A2 plus advanced malignancy 2B and 3A, chemoradiation where the radiation is limited to the pelvic field. In stage 3B and 3C1, there is a high chance the para-aortic nodes may also be involved. So it may in addition to chemoradiation to the pelvis, the radiation should be extended to the para-aortic field also. In stage 3C2, where there is definite evidence of involvement of para-aortic nodes, in addition to chemotherapy plus pelvic and ascended field radiotherapy, systemic chemotherapy also should be given. In 4A, chemotherapy plus pelvic and ascended field radiation is one of the choice, or there is a surgical choice of pelvic excineration can also be offered. In stage 4B, where there is disseminated metastasis, systemic chemotherapy is given along with plus or along with or without radiation, which may be applied to the pelvis or it may be to the modified field depending upon the presence of metastasis. It is only palliative therapy. Complication can occur during radiotherapy also. The first and foremost complication is perforation of the uterus, which can occur during the application of the intrauterine applicator, which will damage the surrounding organs. If it happens, it has to be removed immediately. Another most common complication is acute morbidity due to which depends on the amount of radiation received to the bowel and bladder. Cause nausea and vomiting. For the bladder, cause dysuria, frequency of micturition and hematuria. Bowel, there may be acute diarrhea. All these may subside once the radiation is withheld. Chronic morbidity is due to vasculitis and fibrosis, which usually develop 1 or 2 years after and may result in various fistulas like ureteral fistula, vesicovaginal fistula, rectovaginal fistula also. It can result stenosis of the bowel resulting in obstruction. Also cause radiation proctopathy. Chemotherapy is very rarely used as a single agent or alone for treatment of carcinoma cervix. It is used along with the radiation, what we call as a chemoradiation. Chemotherapy alone is used for palliative treatment in advanced malignancy or recurrent carcinoma. The commonly used drug is cisplatin and paclitaxel, or a combination of carboplatin and paclitaxel is better tolerated by the patient. Another drug used is, especially in recurrent cases, is bevacizumab. Carcinoma cervix can rarely occur along with the pregnancy. And if it occurs during pregnancy, the treatment is the same as in non-pregnant and depends on the stage of the disease. How to manage the pregnancy with the carcinoma cervix? Microinvasion. There is no contraindication for a vaginal delivery. If it is an invasive carcinoma, vaginal delivery is contraindicated. And how to terminate will depend upon the term of pregnancy. Any woman who having invasive carcinoma and found in the late pregnancy, we can wait little more time until it reaches 34 weeks, that is a period of viability, can do a classical cesarean section followed by surgery or radiotherapy depending upon the stage of the disease. If invasive carcinoma is seen early pregnancy, we can give external beam radiotherapy. This will result in abortion and intracavitary radiation can be followed. When the carcinoma develops in the cervix left behind after subtotal hysterectomy is called a stump carcinoma. It is called a true stump carcinoma if it develops after 2 years of hysterectomy. If it develops before 2 years, it is presumed that the disease is present at the time of hysterectomy and it is called a coincidental or a residual or false stump carcinoma. The incidence is about 1% and in the absence of uterus pose problem for treatment as well as for staging the disease. Also, since the cervix is more proximal to the bladder and the rectum, there is a more chance of spreading the disease more easily and present in an advanced stage. It poses a dilemma to treatment because there may be an adhesion between the stump and the bladder and rectum, which poses problem for surgery. It also poses problem for the radiologist because we cannot for giving brachytherapy, we cannot place the intracavitary applicator because of the absence of uterine body. Hence, the prognosis is also bad. The survival is about 40 to 60%. The surgery, if it is in the early stages, a radical pyramectomy with the upper vaginectomy and pelvic lymph node dissection is done. In advanced stages, intensity modulated radiotherapy plus interstitial or intracavitary brachytherapy is given. The prognosis depends mainly on the stage of the disease. The 5-year survival rate in stage 1A is 95%. 1B it drops to 80%. In stage 2, survival is around 64%, and stage 3 it drops to 35 to 40%, and stage 4 only 14% survival. Other prognostic factors are the presence of lymph node involvement, especially the involvement of the para-aortic node, which has a poor prognosis. The different types of cytology also play a role in determining the prognosis. Adenosquamous carcinoma, small cell carcinoma, neuroendocrine tumors, all these have a bad prognosis compared to squamous cell variety, especially the large cell variety has a good prognosis. The risk factors for recurrence of the disease are large tumor size, lymphovascular space invasion, positive lymph nodes, and advanced stage of the disease. Overall recurrence is about 30% after 5 years. A patient is declared cured if she remains well even after 10 years following initial therapy. Carcinoma cervix is an absolutely preventable carcinoma. Primary prevention is possible by vaccinating against human papillomavirus. There are 3 different types of vaccine available: bivalent or Cervarix, quadrivalent vaccine, and a nano vaccine is available, which can, if given to the adults and girls, that is between the ages of 10 to 12 years, can give a protection of about 90%. Secondary prevention is screening for pre-malignant lesion and treating this lesion promptly. And screening methods can be pap smear, HPV DNA screening, or even low-cost methods like visualization with acetic acid and leucocidin. Tertiary prevention is by detecting the lesion early. Any woman coming to the gynecological OPD should be given a first spectrum examination to visualize the cervix so that we can detect or downstage the disease. And early, we know, early treatment of detection in the early stages and treatment will give better prognosis. Since carcinoma cervix is a preventable disease, WHO is planning to eliminate the disease in the next 100 years. That is, to reduce the incidence of carcinoma cervix to less than 4 per 100,000 women. And it has set some global targets to be achieved within the year 2030. The targets to be achieved within the next 10 years are 1. 90% coverage of HPV vaccination of girls below 15 years. Second is 70% of the women in the age group of 35 to 45 years should have a screening to detect pre-malignant lesion, and 90% of those detected to have a precancerous lesion should have treatment. And the third is the 90% of the invasive cancer cases should be managed effectively. To conclude, carcinoma cervix is a preventable disease. If detected early, it is curable, and if detected in late stages, has a very bad prognosis. It's a leading cause of death in low and middle income countries, and WHO is planning to eliminate the disease within next 100 years.